It's total nonsense to say that, automation is not possible. Automation has been here since the Victoria line began.
Hello and welcome to Spectator TV. I'm James Heale and I'm joined today by Michael Simmons, the economics editor of The Spectator. Now, I'm currently in The Spectator, having valiantly got up early and struggled my way through the office early in the morning because, of course, there are 4 days of tube strikes affecting the services here in London. And we're joined by Michael now, who will be in the office later, but is doing this down the line. To say at the start, we did ask the trade unions, the RMT, for comment, but they chose not to give us one, sadly. So, Michael, just tell us why the RMT have gone on strike and why we're expecting 4 days of disruption in the capital.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm going to start, James, by totally ignoring your question and getting my anger on the record, because there's one thing I really love in life, and that's trains.
Yep.
And there's one thing I really hate in life, and that's working from home. And the RMT have taken the joy of getting a train ride to work that I love to do every day away from me, and they've trapped me working from home, which I absolutely hate doing. But this is, we're back to these tube walkouts. We haven't had one since 2023, where we seem to have one just about every week. And this latest dispute is over the RMT's claim that their workers are dangerously overworked and fatigued. So that boils down into a few things. The first one is just obvious. Obviously, they're asking for a bigger pay rise. They've been offered an inflation-busting 3-point-something%. They've already turned that round, said that's not enough. But they say the real issue is that they're all overworked. They're currently working, I think it's a 35-hour week, which is already quite low by a lot of standards, and they want that cut down to 32 hours. Now, TfL and the government have put that out of hand, said we just cannot do that because it would be staggeringly expensive for two reasons. Firstly, you would have to hire, staff to make up the roster. But also, these people that go down to 32 hours, call me a cynic, they're not going to just work the 32 hours. They're going to work what they're working now, but they're going to be able to charge a lot more overtime for it. So that's behind that claim there. The other element of this is tube workers get this discount on the tube. And there's this national equivalent, and they say that they should be entitled to this discount anywhere in the country on any train. And it's a staggering discount. It's something like 75%. That's more than, veterans get on their discount rail card. So that's one of the things. So they're basically going for everything. I think, and by the way, I should say I come from a family of trade unionists. So I don't have this, right-wing economic view that all workers are wrong to strike. I think in the right circumstances, strike action makes sense. But I think any fair-minded person listening to the claims I've set out there would suggest that bringing the capital to a total standstill for an entire week and stopping me getting to the office for those claims is totally unreasonable.
Now, I don't know if you've seen this, Michael, but on X, formerly known as Twitter, the RMT has a very active account where they're sort of tweeting and trying to rebut people's criticisms of them, and they talk about the extreme shifts that some of them are working. One example given is that the reason why they have to go down from 35 hours to 32 is that sometimes their staff don't get off until 1 in the morning or have to get up at 4 in the morning. I thought, first of all, my instinct was that's just journalism, right? Fleet Street normal hours here, sort of erratic. But it's really interesting to see to me in some of the write-ups, such as The Guardian, that you've got campaigners from the 4-day week campaign joining this and saying that actually the 5-day working week is outdated. I suppose there's a case that if the RMT are able to get their way on this, other elements of the public sector will follow, like we've seen in South Cambridgeshire, where the council there has been trialling a 4-day working week. Yeah,
well, look, I think something of this argument within the trade union movement was always inevitable, because when that example of the council you pointed out, when that was announced, a lot of the criticism was it's all well and good saying that, the pen pushers who work in desks in the, council head office, it's all well and good saying they can have a 4-day week. But the people who are doing the more manual jobs, so, your bin men, your cleaners, your roadworks people, etc., they can't have flexible working because of the nature of their jobs. So there's a bit of the RMT saying, if the white collar workers are having these reduced hours, then we want those too. Now, maybe there would be a case for that if we have decided as a country to give up on growth and that everyone was just going to work less and have a leisurely free day weekend. But it's actually not the case. The trend, is for people to actually come back to the office. The tube is getting busier and busier, so there just is no case for this. I think also on the fatigue argument and getting off at 1 a.m, like absolutely, these people do work hard. There's obviously elements of danger in their jobs. If you're if you're working in the stations, you have to deal with potentially unpleasant people jumping through the barrier. And if you're and
that's just Robert Jenrick,
Yeah. And if you're the driver, there is obviously the risk of, something horrendous happening that you have to witness.
Sure, yeah.
As a driver. But I think that's already recognised in their pay. The base salary of a train driver is something like £58,000. So they're well remunerated for the nature of their work. I think it's also difficult for them to claim that it's, mentally intensive when there's this famous viral clip on X doing the rounds of a TfL driver who rightly was sacked because she was seen knitting and also watching a video. Now, that's actually not that unsafe. I mean, obviously she should be sacked and it's unsafe because she should be paying attention. But one of the tweets you mentioned with the RMT doing the rebuttal is they said that the tube was founded 150 years ago and they won't see automation for another 150 years. Well, the reason that driver was able to do her knitting is because these trains have actually been capable of at least partial automation for a long, long time. My favourite example of this is the Victoria line. And if anyone's as obsessed with trains as I am, go on to the BBC iPlayer archive section, and there's a brilliant documentary called, it's something like How We Dug the Victoria Line, that sets this all out. So actually, since 1968, the Victoria Line has been capable of self-driving. So essentially, the way it works is it will get to a station, the sort of signalling system, the electronic currents in the track and all the connections will detect that the next section of track is free. The driver presses a go button and then the train goes itself. So it's total nonsense to say that, automation is not possible. Automation has been here since the Victoria Line began.
And of course, there are those who say we should have driverless trains. Now, the argument I've always heard against this is that, look, the reason why no mayoral has done this, partly obviously you've got people like Sadiq Khan who hail from the Labour movement and have a different view of unions, say for instance Tories, but it's because, of course, if you did get, say for instance, a Conservative mayor in the next election who chose to do this, or a Reform mayor, what they would then do potentially is hold the whole city to ransom. You could shut down the tube network. And my understanding is that the costs involved from that and the massive disruption, as you say there, the figure of more than 200 million just for 4 days, is that it wasn't frankly worth it. It's a bit like sort of imagine if the Battle of Orgreave, for instance, was the only supply of power in this country and the miners had a whole kind of monopoly on it, and that's basically where it stopped. What do you make of that argument? I mean, the train drivers that they're talking about, the RMT are talking about 150 years' time. There seems to be no way this system can carry on in the current form, can it?
Yeah, look, I think that argument, unfortunately, will win the day. I mean, I would absolutely love for the tube to be completely driverless so that we can't be held to ransom, but also it'd be more efficient, it'd be less prone to human error. And in an ideal world, we would have this completely modernized driverless system. But I think TfL abandoned plans when they were looking at this a few years ago, and so did the Department for Transport. Essentially, for the first reason you say is as soon as it's announced, the unions just go on an all-out strike. And they do hold this to ransom, and they do have a lot of cards to play because this is insanely disruptive. It's not just the £200 million. It's going to be something like 700,000 lost work days, which is going to take, a staggering impact on the economy. So there's that for one. But even if you somehow got the unions on side and said, we're going to do this in a way where you all get modernized jobs and you all keep them, there is a fair argument that even though I'm going to contradict myself slightly, in my last answer I said that the technology has been there for a while, to actually modernize it completely to the point where you could take the driver out of the cab it would take billions of pounds, and you would be looking at extended closures to tube lines. One person I spoke to said for each line, you would have to shut it for a whole year. And obviously that would be incredibly disruptive. So the decision would then be, let's get the system as automated as possible, but in the current setup with humans. And that would be okay if, the trade unions didn't have all this sway to bring us down, because we cannot grow as a country and we cannot be serious if, whilst respecting workers' right to strike, allowing them to, bring our capital city to a total standstill. So I think there is some sway in the arguments that if automation is not actually that much of a serious solution, you look at potentially treating them like some other places in essential public services where they are not allowed to strike. One slightly tongue-in-cheek suggestion is, like we have the military reservists, perhaps we should have TfL reserves so that, you or I can get called up to do a shift pressing the stop and go button on the Jubilee line.
Well, that's what they did in the general strike, actually, 100 years ago, which is that they had these volunteers serving in different bits of the kind of works that went on strike, and the railways was one of them, I believe. And of course, I think it was during that time, my understanding is that I think Winston Churchill was the only time he took the tube, actually, which is the Circle Line. He went round and round and round for about 2 hours, had to be rescued as the Chancellor of the Exchequer during the Baldwin government at that time.
Happens to the best of us.
Well, we've all been there after a night out. Michael, I just wonder, looking around the world, are there any kind of analogous debates that have been going on in other countries? Presumably, of course, the UK has got the oldest underground system, first working underground system in the world, but more than 150 years old. But there must have been others that sort of mechanised how these debates, etc. Are there any lessons that can be learned from abroad?
Yeah, well, look, if you look in the Far East, countries like Japan, Singapore have much more high-tech transport systems than us. I must confess, I don't know too much about the labour movement in those countries, but there are certainly states where the government, puts less sway into the power of trade unions. I always think to myself, though, thank goodness we're not France, who still have a lot more strikes than us. There is another issue, though, on the pay side of this, that I keep writing about this in my economics role, that, inflation is back. It's going to go to double the Bank of England's 2% target. Now, the bank and the OBR now and the IMF have all said that this is partly because of regulated wage setting by the government. So there's an issue that obviously a Labour government is going to be more inclined than the previous government was to say, fine, let's do another bumper pay offer to the RMT to get them on side, because ultimately we are the party of the trade union movement. But this is not just an issue about whether TfL can afford this, which, by the way, it can. It was just bailed out a couple of years ago by government to the tune of billions. But if they do this, this is going to feed into this spiral of rising wages, pushing up inflation. Now, obviously, wages going up is a good thing, but if it doesn't come with productivity gains, then all you do get is inflation, and this cycle continues.
And of course, we all know that unions take their cues from each other, and obviously not everyone has the kind of negotiating power or ability of the RMT, but clearly there'll be those who be saying, look, those guys are getting a bit more money, why don't I? And we saw a bit of this, I think, last year when Louise Haigh, who was then Transport Secretary, settled on the train driver strike, which obviously then encouraged other leaders to be a bit more militant in their actions.
And kudos to the RMT, by the way. I mean, I don't agree with what they're doing, but if you're a paid up member, you certainly get your money's worth. They seem to be more successful than almost any other trade union, but that's because they do just have this power to bring the capital city to standstill.
Well, getting their money's worth, increasing, there'll be even more money in the future. So thank you, Mike, for joining us, and hopefully one day, maybe later this week, we'll see you in the office soon.
Here's hoping.